Have you ever wondered what ordinary families truly ate 300 years ago? Not kings, not nobles just. The everyday people, tending their little gardens, sharing heavy loaves of bread, and warming their hands beside a humble hearth. Tonight, we slow down and step gently into their world of quiet meals, flickering firelight, and the simple comforts that carried families through every season.
Hello, dear
and welcome back to Go to Sleep History in your peaceful corner, where the past softens into a lullaby. To all of our returning viewers, thank you. Your steady presence, your kind comments, and your warm support truly keep this channel glowing. And if you're new here, I'm so glad you've wandered in tonight. If gentle storytelling and calming journeys through history help you drift into rest, I'd be honored if you pressed subscribe and joined our little sleepy village. Tonight, we travel 3 centuries back in time, not to grand banquets or royal feasts, but into the quiet kitchens of ordinary families. To the gardens that fed them, the bread that grounded them, the milk that soothed their evenings, and the humble meals that shaped their days. For the next while, let your mind unwind as we wander through seasons of food, flavor, and soft, simple comforts, told gently, like stories shared beside a warm nighttime hearth. And when the spoken part of our journey comes to its gentle close, the screen will fade into soft, calming music, so you can drift even deeper into rest without interruption. A slow, comforting pause, like settling into a chair beside the fire, so take a deep breath. Find your cozy spot, and let's begin our peaceful walk into the past. A quiet evening in 1725. The hearth awakens. The day is quietly folding itself away, like a well-worn blanket being laid to rest. It is the year 1725, and the world moves at a gentler pace because it must. There is no rush of engines, no hum of electric lamps, no endless glow of screens. Instead, the light fades slowly and honestly, turning the village lanes into dusky ribbons of gold and gray. Somewhere in this village small, humble, and stitched together with footpaths and gossip smoke drifts lazily from crooked chimneys. The wood is damp from last week's rain, so the smoke comes out slow and sweet, curling upward as though it has all the time in the world. A few dogs bark, and then, as if remembering that night is coming, they stop. Chickens shuffle on their perches. A cow lows softly in a far stall. Even the wind seems to sigh rather than blow. Inside one particular cottage plain, wooden and sturdier than it looks, the evening is settling in with familiar warmth. The door creaks softly, the same way it has creaked for years, and the air smells faintly of earth, wool, and the bread that was baked earlier that morning. This is no grand home. No tapestries hang on the walls. No polished floors gleam underfoot. There's just a single large room with a loft above it, a place where children sleep close to one another for warmth. Down below, beneath beams roughened by decades of smoke and fingers, the family's entire life is gathered around the hearth. The hearth is not only the kitchen, it is the heater, the light source, the storyteller, the clock, and the mood. Families do not drift to the hearth. They orbit it like planets around the sun. In the glow of firelight, everything feels softer, as though the flames themselves have learned to whisper. Tonight, the fire crackles steadily, the logs releasing little snaps of sound that echo off the wooden walls. A pot hangs over the embers, its metal darkened by countless meals. Its scent fills the room. Warm vegetables, soft herbs, and something faintly smoky from the spoon that was used earlier in the day. The fire-esque glow flickers across the room and settles on a loaf of bread sitting on the table, a dense, dark brown loaf, heavy as a stone and just as honest. This is the world of an ordinary family 3 centuries ago. Their meals are plain but comforting, their days full of labor but full also of small joys. Tonight, as the sun slips completely behind the hills and leaves only a faint peach streak behind, the family gathers for supper. There is no clock to announce the hour. Instead, the slowing of light and the quieting of animals mark the time. Day is done. Night is here, and supper is waiting. The mother moves silently through the room, setting bowls on the table, each one chipped a little differently, each one with a history of its own. The father stirs the pot, not because it needs stirring, but because stirring feels like part of the ritual. Children settle onto benches, bare feet dangling and tapping against the wooden legs. A soft candle burns on the table, and its flame bends now and then whenever someone walks past. Supper itself is unremarkable by modern standards. A vegetable stew, rich with onions and cabbage, thickened by yesterday's bread. A few peas float on the surface, bright and cheerful. The bread cut with a knife so dull it shaves more than slicey scrumbles slightly as it is passed around. No one complains. Bread is not meant to be soft. Bread is meant to keep hunger away. There is little salt, no butter tonight, or perhaps just a smear for each person, stretched carefully across the rough bread. The stew is simple, but the simplicity is soothing. Each bite carries the warmth of the hearth, the sweetness of slow-cooked onions, and the comfort of knowing that tomorrow will bring another pot, another loaf, another evening of sharing stories. Because for this family, supper is more than food. It is the days, anchored the moment, where everything slows, where the world shrinks to the small glow of the fire, and where the only things that matter are within arm's reach. After long hours in fields or gardens, after carrying water or mending torn sleeves, after tending animals or walking to the mill, supper is the soft landing at the end of the day. And this meal is not eaten quickly. There is no rushing, no gulping down food to return to work, no multitasking with screens or scrolling. Every movement is unhurried. A spoon dips into the pot. A piece of bread is broken. A child giggles when the fire pops loudly. Someone tells a story about the neighbor's goat escaping again. Someone else mentions hearing a rumor in the market. Laughter comes idly, the kind of small, round laughter that fills a room like warm air. The family eats slowly because there is nothing else to do after supper except rest. Modern life crams itself with distractions, but in 1725, distraction is a luxury no one invented yet. Darkness outside is deep. It presses against the shuttered windows. Staying awake means burning candles, and candles cost time and labor, so families learn to drift with the rhythms of nature. The fire crackles. The candles flicker. Eyelids grow heavy, just as naturally as bread reases or seasons change. The only sounds inside the cottage are peaceful. The soft scrape of spoons against wooden bowls, the low murmur of voices, the rhythmic creak of the bench. Even the fire seems to know that night requires calm. Its pops are gentle, rather than exuberant. In the corner, a dog sighs contentedly, settling into a ball of fluff and loyalty. For a moment, imagine sitting at this table. The wood is warm from so many hands resting on it. The air is fragrant with stew and smoke. The bread is coarse, but when dipped into the broth, it softens into something nourishing. Your fingers feel the rough surface of the bowl, its glaze slightly uneven. The fire warms your cheeks, your shoulders. Relax. There is no hurry here, no noise, no tasks buzzing in the mind. This is the world we will explore slow, grounded, full of small details that fed ordinary families 3 centuries ago. A world where meals were earned, cherished, shared, and remembered. A world where food wasn't a convenience. It was connection. As supper fades and the bowls grow empty, the family lingers a little longer near the fire. Outside, night deep. Inside, the hearth glows like a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. And just like that, Chapter 1 closes gently, inviting you to settle deeper into this slow, warm world. The little garden that fed the year, the first light of dawn, finds its way through the shutters long before anyone in the cottage opens their eyes. It slips across the floor in pale stripes, nudging the corners of the room awake. Morning in 1725 does not arrive with alarms or phone screens. It arrives with the soft chorus of the world outside. A rooster clearing its throat, a distant cow shifting in its stall, and the rustle of wind moving through the hedges. Outside the back door lies the family's most important treasure, not a chest of coins, nor a hidden stash of fine goods, but a small, humble garden. A patch of earth scarcely larger than a modern living room. Yet it holds the family's hopes, their worries, and much of their survival. This garden is never completely silent. Even now, before the sun has fully risen, Leaves tremble with dew. A beetle crawls across a cabbage leaf, unbothered by the sleepiness of the world around it. The soil itself is dark, rich, and soft from years of hands, turning it, weeding it, feeding it with compost and scraps. To an outsider, the garden looks plain, but to the family who tends it, each row tells a story. There are the cabbages, the heavy-headed workhorses of the garden-tough, loyal, dependable. They grow even in chilly weather and sit patiently in the earth, waiting to be picked. There are onions, their long green tops waving slightly in the morning breeze. Onions flavor nearly every meal the family cooks. Even a tiny wedge of onion can turn plain porridge or dull turnips into something comforting. Along the edges, a few peas cling to their vines, some still sleeping inside their pods. The children love picking the first peas of the season, cracking open the pods to reveal tiny green pearls. The first handful of fresh peas each year is so sweet it feels almost like a dessert. Sometimes, a child eats them before they make it back to the house. The parents pretend not to notice. Near the corner of the garden grows a scattering of carrots, though they are never the perfectly smooth, bright orange ones we know today. These carrots are thin, twisted, and occasionally resemble forks or roots tangled in a dance. But their flavor is earthy and honest, and when tossed into a pot with beans or meat, they soften into something beautiful. And then there is the herb patch, perhaps the most cherished corner of all. Parsley, sage, thyme, and maybe a stubborn rosemary bush that refuses to die. Herbs are the difference between a meal that is merely filling and one that lifts the family as spirits. Herbs are magic, not exotic, not expensive, but transformative. A pinch of thyme can make even a thin broth taste like a feast. Children are essential to this garden. This is not a place where grown-ups do all the work while little ones play. Here, small hands are part of the process. Children plant seeds with fingers still smudged with soot from last night's fire. They chase rabbits away from the lettuce. They carry water in small wooden buckets, sloshing half of it onto their feet, laughing when drops splash onto the soil. Their grandparents teach them the old knowledge without books, passed mouth to ear, season to season. Plant early, but not too early. Watch the clouds in May. They'll tell you what June will bring. Save the strongest seeds. They remember how to grow. Seeds were not purchased in neat packets. They were saved, gifted, traded. A neighbor with a particularly hardy crop of peas might offer a handful of seeds in exchange for a potion of butter or a repair to a broken tool. Seeds were wealth, and sharing them was a gesture of trust. The garden feeds the family not only in the bright months, but also in the dark, cold ones. It is more than a pantry, it is a teacher of patience. You cannot rush a carrot. You cannot make an onion bulb faster by scolding it. Everything must move in its time. And for families 3 centuries ago, that slowness was grounding. Each plant's growth was a little reassurance, a small promise that tomorrow would bring nourishment. Not all food comes from the neat rows of the garden. As the sun rises higher, the family spreads out toward the hedgerows and meadows to forage for wild foodsberries, mushrooms, herbs, nuts. These wild gifts add variety to their meals in ways the garden cannot. Blackberries are treasures. The first berries of the season stained fingers purple and lips even darker. Children return home with baskets, half full, and faces entirely full of mischief. Wild mushrooms grow near old tree trunks, but picking them requires knowledge passed down carefully. One wrong mushroom could bring illness, so only the elders choose them. In the autumn, the family gathers zeal nets, chestnuts cracking them open in front of the hearth during long winter nights. Foraging is not recreation. It is necessity. A single basket of berries might sweeten an entire week's worth of porridges. Animals blend naturally into this world. Chickens scratch in the dirt, eating pests that would otherwise ravage the vegetables. In return, they offer eggs all, speckled, precious. Chickens are not pets, but they are valued companions in the cycle of food. Sometimes there is a rabbit hutch near the garden. A few quiet, twitch-nosed creatures who grow quickly and offer meat when the time comes. A pig, if the family is fortunate enough to raise one, eats scraps from the kitchen, rooting through leftovers that would otherwise go to waste. Pigs transform scraps into meat and fat, both worth their weight in gold during winter. Nothing in this world is wasted, nothing at all. Vegetable scraps become compost. Sour milk becomes buttermilk. Broken bread becomes thickener for stew. The garden gives, and the family gives back in kind. The work of tending the garden never truly ends. Some days are spent weeding under the hot sun until backs ache. Other days involve crouching low to inspect plants for pests or gently tying up drooping stems. The rhythm is steady, dependably like breathing. On a good day, the family gathers at dusk, baskets full. On a hard day, when frost arrives too early or insects eat their fill, the family gathers anyway, taking measure of what remains. Through the seasons, the garden mirrors their emotions. Spring brings hope. Summer brings labor. Autumn brings relief. Winter brings humility. Yet through all of it, the little patch of earth becomes a kind of promise, quiet, patient, and generous. Tonight, as supper is prepared, the vegetables from this garden will find their way into the pot. A few onions, a handful of peas saved from earlier, a carrot sliced thin. Herbs crushed gently between the fingers. Each ingredient carries a story. Planted months ago, tended lovingly, harvested at the right moment, and when the family sits at their table, dipping heavy bread into stew, flavored with the very plants they grew, there is a sense of deep connection not just to the earth, but to the rhythm of life itself. This small patch of ground is their companion, their provider, their teacher. It feeds them with food, yes, but also with a kind of confidence. The confidence that they can endure one season, then the next, and the next. And as the last light of day fades over the garden, the dew settling once again on leaves that will greet tomorrow's sun, the family closes their door with quiet gratitude. Bread, the center of every table morning, arrives gently in the little village, with pale sunlight stretching across fields still heavy with dew. Inside the cottage, before anyone has fully rubbed the sleep from their eyes, the comforting smell of grain begins to drift through the air. Not the smell of freshly baked bakery loaves as modern kitchens might know, but the earthy, honest scent of flour being opened, stirred, sifted, and slowly coaxed into life. For families 300 years ago, bread was not a side dish. It wasn't something added casually to round out a meal. It was the meal, the anchor, the daily companion. If the pot of stew was the soul of the hearth, then bread was its beating heart, steady, reliable, and always present. Today, the family is preparing for baking day, a weekly ritual that shapes the rhythm of the entire household. Baking isn't simply a task. It's a ceremony of survival. Bread must be prepared carefully, rationed wisely, and baked in quantities large enough to sustain the family for days. There is no soft packaged loaf on a supermarket shelf to replace a mistake. If the bread burns, collapses, or molds early, the family goes without. The mother begins by opening a wooden bin of flour. It isn't the pure white flour familiar today. This flour is speckled with fragments of husk, bits of bran, and tiny flecks of the soil where the grain once grew. It feels coarse between the fingers, coarser still when kneaded into dough. But this coarseness is what makes the bread durable. A dense loaf stays edible longer. A hardy crust protects the inside from pests. So the family accepts its heaviness as a necessity. The type of bread they bake depends entirely on what the land has offered that year. Rye grows well in colder regions, and bread made from rye is dark, substantial, and slightly sour. Many families rely on rye because it is dependable just as they are. Barley and oats often make their way into the dough, stretching the precious wheat flour so the family gets more loaves from the harvest. Wheat is the prized grain, the softest and sweetest, but it is also the most expensive. Only rarely does a poor family enjoy a loaf made mostly of wheat. On the table sits the family's prized possession, the sourdough starter, a bubbling, living mixture passed down from generation to generation. Starters can be older than the children who feed them, older than the cottage itself. Some are said to carry the memory of countless winters and summers each loaf, a tiny continuation of many before it. The grandmother tends the starter as though it is a family pet, checking the smell, the bubbles, the texture. She nods approvingly, dips her wooden spoon, and mixes the glowing starter into the flour and water. The mixture thickens under her hands, becoming stubborn, sticky, and almost alive. The children watched with fascination as she kneads the dough, pushing, folding, pressing, coaxing it into readiness. Her hands are strong, shaped by decades of kneading, washing, gathering, and carrying. When she presses the dough, it yields like soft clay before stiffening again. The dough rests under a cloth while the family prepares for the next part of baking day, the communal oven. Not every home in 1725 has an oven. Ovens are expensive, time-consuming to heat, and fuel-hungry. Instead, many villages share a centrally located stone oven that stands like a guardian of community life. It is used once or twice a week, and families take turns bringing their dough to be baked. As the family walks toward the oven, they pass neighbors carrying dough in wooden bowls wrapped with cloths. Children run ahead, eager to see who has arrived and whose bread will look the finest today. Baking day is not just about bread, it is about gathering. It is a coming together of hands and stories, gossip and laughter, work and warmth. Smoke rises from the large stone oven, and the air hums with familiar sounds, crackling firewood, soft chatter, the occasional clink of a spoon against a bowl. The oven has been curing all morning, heated with a massive fire until the stones are hot enough to bake dozens of loaves at once. The village bakeran, unofficial title, often just the person with the strongest back and the steadiest hand sweeps the ashes to the side and gestures for the families to bring forward their dough. Each family marks their dough with a distinct symbol, a cross, a swirl, a line, or even a tiny carved wooden token pressed into the top. Without these marks, chaos would surely ensue, for once the loaves are baked, they all resemble each other. Dark, round, and rustic. As the loaves slide into the oven, the heat warms the baker's face. The smell that emerges is deep and comforting, filling the entire village square. Neighbors linger, chatting while they wait. Someone mentions a rumor from the next town. Someone else laughs about a goat that escaped into the lane again. Children chase one another between carts. The air is gentle and social, a reminder that bread binds not just families, but entire communities. While they wait for their loaves to bake, some families stay near the oven, warming their hands and swapping stories. Others walk back to the cottage to prepare the meal that will welcome the new bread home. When the loaves finally emerge, they look nearly identical. Dark-crusted, hard on the outside, warm and moist inside. The baker hands each family their share, carefully checking the marks on top to match loaf to owner. The children carry the warm, heavy loaves back home with the solemnity of carrying something sacred. Back in the cottage, the first loaf is placed on the table, still warm. Its crust cracks slightly when pressed. When sliced, crumbs scatter like tiny flecks of grain across the wooden boards. The bread is so dense that one slice is enough to satisfy a hard-working belly. The family eats it slowly, dipping pieces into stew or spreading a thin layer of butter if the week has been generous. Bread is not merely food, it organizes life. A good harvest means full bellies. A poor harvest means fewer loaves, thinner slices, heavier worry. Bread shapes conversations, hopes, and prayers. Bread is currency, donation, offering, and bond. When a neighbor falls ill, a loaf is left at their door. When a child is born, bread is shared in celebration. When someone dies, bread is eaten with quiet respect. And bread teaches humility. Any number of things can go wrong. A sudden chill can slow the rising. A wet week can spoil the flour. A crack in the oven can char the crust. Families learn to adjust, to adapt, to stretch what they have. Adding barley to wheat, mixing oats into dough, grinding dried peas into flour, none of it is shameful. It is ingenuity born from necessity. As the day winds down, and the loaves cool on the shelf, the family sits around the hearth. The fire glows softly, illuminating the sturdy bread now resting nearby, ready to nourish them through the week. The family members talk quietly, breaking off pieces and savoring them as though tasting the earth itself, the harvest, the weather, the stories, the labor, the love. In the flicker of firelight, the humble loaf becomes something more, a symbol of resilience, of routine, of life woven through seasons. It is not glamorous, not special, not rare, but And as night settles, the last crumbs brushed from the table, the bread cools fully. Tomorrow, it will be sliced again, and again. And with each slice, the story of this family, this little world from 300 years ago. The hearth, the home's beating heart. Evening drifts gently across the village like a soft woolen shawl being placed over tired shoulders. Inside the small wooden cottage, the world narrows to a single glowing center. The hearth. Here, life happens. Here, days begin. Meals are born, stories are shared, and nights wind down into sleep. In a time before stoves, ovens, radiators, or electricity, the hearth is not simply part of the home, it is the home's pulse. Tonight, as the last streaks of sunlight fade, the family gathers instinctively near the warm glow. The fire has already been coaxed into life, a small pile of coals muttering softly beneath a blackened iron pot. The pot hangs from a hook that creaks faintly whenever it is nujda. Sounds so familiar that no one even notices it anymore. The walls around the hearth tell a history of meals. Thick soot stains spread unevenly upward, a dark memory of countless fires. Small cracks in the stone reveal decades of expansion and cooling. The stones hold stories, the heat shifting across their surfaces with the same rhythm it did for parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. A wooden spoon rests nearby, worn so smooth that its handle shines faintly in the firelight. The spoon has stirred porridge, stew, broth, and even laundry water on hard winter days. Each nick and scratch is a tiny chapter written in the language of use. Tools aren't disposable in this age. They are companions in the daily work of living. The hearth performs multiple roles, and each one is essential. First, it is the kitchen. Today's meal simmers slowly in the iron pot, a stew thick with cabbage, barley, onions, and perhaps a bit of smoked fat. There is no quick cooking anything. Everything is patient. Everything humbles itself to time and fire. A stew might bubble for hours before reaching the right softness, the flavors gradually intertwining like threads in a tapestry. The pot swings gently when stirred, releasing a comforting cloud of aroma. Children hover expectantly, sniffing the air. A long day in the fields or garden gives even the simplest food the power to feel luxurious. The fire pops unexpectedly, sending a spark up the chimney. A child gasps, then giggles, and the room softens with warmth. The hearth's second role is the home cider, the one and only defense against the cold that unravels across the countryside the moment the sun disappears. There are no thermostats, no separate heated rooms. Families know the cold intimately the way it creeps across floors, hides in corners, and bites at fingers and toes, so they cluster near the hearth, letting the fire's heat soak into their clothes, their bones, their mood. Even the furniture reflects this design. Thick benches sit close to the hearth. A braided rug, faded from years of ashen feet, marks the warmest spot on the floor. A dog curls there now, tail tucked over nose, enjoying the best seat in the house. The hearth is the light source, too. Candles exist, but candles cost. Materials: wax, tallow, wick. Rushlights are cheaper, but they burn quickly, so the fire becomes the primary light. Its flicker dances on wooden beams, casting shadows that sway gently on the walls. The room feels alive with movement, even though everything is still. Once supper is served, the fire becomes something else. The social heart of the family. Work pauses, chores loosen their grip. This is when stories are told, when laughter softens the edges of a hard day. Tonight, the father begins a tale about a mischievous goat that escaped into the neighbor's cabbage patch. As he speaks, he taps the side of the pot with a wooden spoon for emphasis. The children lean forward. The mother smiles as she mends a shirt in the glow of the flames. Even mundane tallies feel grandeur. Fire transforms conversation into ritual. Sometimes, the stories are family history stories of ancestors, old hardships, or humorous misadventures. Sometimes, they are rumors from the market or news from a distant village. Sometimes, they are silly tales, invented on the spot to make the children laugh. The hearth hears all of them and holds them warmly, as if tucking them away. But the hearth is also a practical workshop. When the meal is finished, The pot may stay on the fire to heat water for washing dishes or scrubbing clothes. The same iron tripod that holds the cooking pot might later hold a kettle of water for bathing. Everything in this world has multiple uses. People cannot afford single-purpose tools, so the hearth evolves with the moment, shifting roles seamlessly. Fuel is precious. Wood must be gathered, chopped, dried. In places where forests are scarce, families burn peat or even dried animal dung. The fire must be tended with care. Too much wood, and the supply dwindles. Too little, and the fire might die, forcing the family to spend the next morning coaxing it back to life from cold ashes. Children learn early how to bank the coals at night, piling ashes strategically so the embers remain alive until morning. Restarting a fire from embers is far easier than striking a spark with flint and steel. Each morning's first task is to uncover the sleeping coals, feed them gently with dry twigs, and watch with satisfaction as the flames return. Warm and loyal, every household member knows the rhythm of the hearth. When to stir the pot, when to add fuel, when to shield the flames from a draft, when to set a kettle near the coals to stay warm. These motions become muscle memory, passed down in quiet gestures rather than instructions. A child mimics a parent remembers a grandparent's technique. A family builds a vocabulary without ever speaking it aloud. And of course, the hearth is the guardian of the night. After supper, after stories, after the smallest child has begun to yawn, the fire dims. The parents sit closer to it, murmuring softly about the next day's tasks, whether it will rain, whether the garden needs weeding, whether enough wood is stacked for the coming cold. The fire shrinks to a warm glow, soft and low. Shadows lengthen across the ceiling. One by one, the children climb the ladder to the loft, carrying blankets made heavy by years. From above, faint giggles drift down, followed by whispers, followed by silence. Below, the parents linger a few moments more. There is comfort in these final minutes, watching the last sparks drift upward, feeling the warmth slip into their hands, listening to the quiet breathing of the house. Eventually, someone places the thick iron screen across the hearth. The embers pulse like sleepy eyes. The parents settle into bed, close enough to the fire that the chill cannot reach them. The hearth watches over them all night long, its breath slow and steady. Even as sleep folds around the family, the fire keeps its vigil. And in the morning, when the first rooster begins its argument with the world, the hearth will awaken again, ready to warm, to cook, to brighten, to listen, and to be lived around. It is not merely a place where meals happen. It is a center around which life gathers, day after day, year after year. The hearth doesn't just warm the home, it warms the story of the family itself. Meet a rare and celebrated guest. The morning begins with a soft mist settling over the fields, a silver veil that hides the edges of the world. Dew clings to each blade of grass, bending them under its delicate weight. The cottage is waking slowly, stretching its timbers with tiny creaks, and inside the family prepares for another ordinary day, one filled with chores, laughter, and the quiet hope of a good meal. Today, though, there is something different in the air. A faint excitement hums beneath the morning routine, because once in a while rare, enough to count on one hand, meat graces the family's table. In a world where nearly every meal is vegetables, grains, or milk-based, the appearance of meat feels almost like a holiday, even if it isn't one. To understand how rare and meaningful meat was 300 years ago, you must imagine a world governed by strict rules of land, of ownership, and of survival. Most families did not simply go into the forest and hunt freely. Forests, game, and hunting rights were often reserved for nobles or wealthy landowners. A deer wandering across the edge of a field might tempt a hungry family, but hunting it without permission could lead to harsh punishment. Even hares and rabbits were sometimes protected under local laws. So meat from hunted animals was a rarity, something whispered about more than actually eaten. Instead, families relied mostly on the animals they themselves raised, carefully, slowly, with patience and caution. A pig, if the family had one, was treasure. The pig might wander the yard, rooting through scraps and leftovers, converting what the family couldn't use into something precious. But pigs are expensive to raise, needing grains or space. and so many families kept only one, sometimes none. That single pig would be raised throughout the year and slaughtered near winter, its meat salted, smoked, and stored to last months. A cow was even more costly. Most families with a cow used it mainly for milk, not meat. The cow was far more valuable alive, giving milk, butter, and cheese. Killing it for meat was a decision made only in desperation or when the cow grew too old to produce. Chickens and eggs were far more common. Chickens roamed the garden, clucking at insects and scratching through soil. A family might eat a chicken only occasionally, usually an older hen who no longer laid eggs. Eggs themselves were precious. They brightened days when meals felt dull and thin. Rabbits provided the closest thing to affordable meat. Families kept rabbits in hutches tucked behind the cottage. Rabbits grew quickly, reproduced easily, and could be traded, eaten, or given as gifts. A rabbit stew could turn an ordinary evening into something special, especially when paired with onions or herbs from the garden. But today is a rare day, not because a pig was slaughtered or a rabbit caught, but because the father returned from the village market with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside lies a modest piece of salted pork, traded or bartered for beans, cider, or labor. It is not a large, cut barely enough to feed a family of 5, but even a small piece of meat can transform a meal, lending richness and flavor to the simplest stew. The children gather excitedly near the table as the mother unwraps the meat. Salt crystals cling to the surface like tiny jewels. The smell is sharp, salty, and comforting. She rinses it carefully, softening the salt that has preserved it during its long journey from butcher to buyer. This meat did not come from a supermarket. It came from a pig raised months ago, butchered, salted, and stored. Meat preservation was essential, because fresh meat spoiled quickly. Families without access to ice or cold storage relied on 3 methods. Salting. Thick layers of coarse salt were packed around cuts of meat, drawing out moisture and slowing. The result was salty, sometimes very salty. So rinsing or soaking was necessary before cooking. Smoking meat hung above a slow fire, absorbing smoke until it hardened. The result was deeply flavored, lasting for weeks or even months. Drying, thin strips of meat left in warm, dry, breezy spaces hardened and kept well. Jerky-like, tough, but reliable. Today's small piece of pork was likely salted, maybe lightly smoked. The mother slices it into thin strips, so thin they are almost translucent. This ensures every bite of stew has a taste of meat, even when the bowl contains mostly vegetables. She places the slices in the pot with onions, turnips, barley, and cabbage. The meat hisses gently as it touches the hot iron. The children inhale deeply, their eyes shining. The scent of meat has a way of filling the room with anticipation. It is richer, deeper, more festive than their usual dinners. As the stew simmers, the father tells stories about the last time they had meat. He mentions a rabbit that escaped from its hutch, causing much chaos. The children laugh. Even the mother smiles as she chops herbs. Meat brings not just nourishment, but also stories, memories, tied to the rare treat. In some villages, families gather during the winter to share a pig slaughtering day, known in some cultures as a pig-killing feast. It's a communal event, part work, part celebration. Neighbors help each other butcher, prepare, and store the meat. Nothing is wasted. The head becomes broth, the fat becomes lard and soap, the skin becomes cracklings. The bones become stock. In a world without food waste, every part matters. Today, though it's a quiet, private treat, the meat stew bubbles slowly for hours, softening the vegetables until they nearly melt. The pork flavors the broth, turning it rich and hearty. When supper time arrives, the family gathers eagerly around the table. The first ladleful goes to the youngest child, a small tradition symbolizing care and protection. The children marvel at the tiny bits of pork floating among the vegetables. Each bite is savored slowly, almost reverently. The father closes his eyes for a moment as he tastes the stew. It reminds him of his childhood, of winter nights when his mother would add a scrap of bacon to the pot. The mother takes a gentle bite, letting the flavor linger. Even the dog sits up straighter, sensing the specialness of the evening. The stew is not a feast by modern standards, but for this family, it's a celebration. A reminder of good fortune, a promise that effort and patience bring rewards. As the meal winds down, the parents speak about saving the bones. Tomorrow, the bones will flavor another pot of soup. Tomorrow's soup will not have meat, but it will have the memory of meat, the whisper of flavor that stretches just a little further. When the last bowl is empty and the fire settles into soft embers, the family relaxes with full bellies and warm hearts. Meat will not appear again for many days, perhaps weeks, but tonight it has filled them with comfort that reaches deeper than the stomach. In this world, the rarity of meat makes it meaningful. Its scarcity gives it power to lift a meal, brighten a day, or turn an ordinary evening into a quiet, unforgettable celebration. Milk, butter, and cheese. Everyday little luxuries, 1001,200 words. Morning unfolds gently across the fields, painting everything with a soft wash of pale gold. The cottage is cool. The fire is still waking from its night's slumber, but the air inside holds the faint, familiar scent of something warm and comforting. Milk. For an ordinary family 300 years ago, dairy was not merely an ingredient. It was a blessing, a quiet luxury, a reliable companion through seasons of plenty and seasons of need. And unlike meat, which came rarely and ceremoniously, dairy was a small joy that visited daily if the family was fortunate enough to keep animals, a cow or a goat, the household treasures. Most families couldn't afford many animals, so the dairy source in a household was almost always one of two creatures. A cow, large, gentle, endlessly patient. A cow provided milk enough for drinking, cooking, making butter, and crafting cheese. Even a modest yield was a lifeline. A goat, hardier, cheaper, easier to feed. Goats were common in rougher landscapes, in hillier villages, where cows would struggle. Goat's milk had a strong scent, but families appreciated its richness. Whether cow or goat, these animals were treasures. They were fed, brushed, spoken to, and guarded carefully. Their health was as important as the family's own, because a day without milk could turn into a week without butter, cheese, or porridge enriched the way children loved. Milking, the gentle ritual each morning, begins with the mother or father walking quietly into the cold dawn, a small wooden stool in hand, a pail hanging from the other. The air smells of hay, earth, and the warmth of the animal waiting patiently. Milking is a gentle rhythm, one learned from childhood. Grip, pull, release. Grip, pull, release. Warm milk streams into the pail, frothing softly. Its scent fills the small barn or lean-to. Steam rises from it in the chilly morning air. Children sometimes watch in fascination. A few might even try, their small hands awkward, the cow glancing back as if amused. Back inside, the milk is poured through a cloth to strain out bits of hay or dust, settling into crocks or jugs on the table. Fresh milk is more than a drink. It's the starting point of countless meals. Butter. Gold on the table. Butter was precious, so precious that families used it sparingly, spreading it thin over coarse bread as though painting with it. Churning butter was a task that required patience and muscle. A large wooden churn held cream collected over days. The churn was tall, slightly uneven from years of use, its lid worn smooth from hands pressing it down. Inside, the cream sloshes heavily. The dash along and sturdy moves up and down, rhythmically. Thump, splash, thump, splash. Minutes pass, sometimes nearly an hour. Children might take turns, giggling at the sound the churn makes, amused by the resistance of the thickening cream. Finally, the texture changes. The sound changes. Too soft, liquid becoming dense. Butter separates itself, turning into soft yellow clumps. The mother smiles. This is the moment she's been waiting for. She lifts the lid, scoops out the fresh butter, and presses it gently with wooden paddles to remove the remaining buttermilk. The butter is then shaped into a small round pat or block, never perfect, sometimes uneven, always beautiful. The buttermilk left behind is valuable, used for pancakes, porridge, or drinking. Nothing is wasted. Butter itself is a quiet miracle. Spread thinly on bread, melted into hot porridge, dotted onto cooked vegetables, used to coax flavor from the simplest dishes. Its golden richness could turn a lean day into a good one. Cheese. The art of making food last cheese was the unsung hero of dairy life. Milk spoils quickly, but cheese survives weeks, even months, if tended properly. Even the poorest households knew at least one method of making cheese. Fresh cheese, also called cottage cheese, or curds, simply made by warming milk and adding something acidic, vinegar, lemon juice, or an old starter. Curds separate from whey, forming soft, white chunks. Fresh cheese was mild and comforting, eaten within a day or two. Harder cheese, a bit more work. Curds were pressed, salted, and stored in cool, dark places, cellars, holes in stone walls, or under cloth coverings. Some families made wheels the size of a plate. Others made small rounds, no bigger than a fist. Cheese hung from rafters or rested beside apples in root cellars, maturing slowly, firming over weeks. Each crack in the surface told a story of humidity, air, and care. Cheese was food you could trust, something to brighten a winter meal, something to trade at market, something to serve proudly when neighbors visited. Milk in the kitchen, comfort in every drop. Dairy shows up everywhere in the family's meals. Morning porridge enriched with milk instead of water, richer, silkier, more comforting. Stews with a spoonful of cream to thicken them. Bread brushed with buttermilk for a softer crust. A mug of warm milk at bedtime for children, an old comfort, older than any recipe book. Pancakes or griddle cakes made on special days with eggs plus milk. Simple puddings, thickened with milk or curds, sweetened with honey or the faintest hint of spice. Milk was nourishment, sweetness, and warmth in one. The risks? Milk gone wrong. In a world before pasteurization, fresh milk could spoil quickly. On warm days, milk soured before noon. Families learned tricks. Boil the milk for safety. Use sour milk for baking it. Tanks makes griddle cake soft. Give the too sour milk to pigs. Turn risky milk into cheese before it spoils. Every drop mattered. Losing milk meant losing meals. Milk is currency. Because dairy was so valuable, it often became a form of barter. A pot of fresh butter could be traded for grain firewood. The tool repair a small piece of meat seed for planting cheese could buy cloth or candles. Milk could be offered to a sick neighbor. Buttermilk could be swapped for herbs. Dairy was not just food. It was social glue. Evening rituals. A cup of warm comfort. At the end of the day, when the fire dims and shadows stretch across the rafters, the children settle near the hearth with a warm drink in hand. A little milk, maybe a drop of honey, maybe a pinch of herb. The warmth spreads through them like a soft blanket, calming restless thoughts and sleepy eyes. Mothers believed rightly that warm milk could lull even the liveliest child toward sleep. Fathers drank it, too, after long days in the fields, savoring the soothing comfort. Milk was simplicity. Milk was kindness. Milk was the quiet end. Too many long days. Dairy as a small miracle. Some foods in this era were labor-intensive. Some were rare, some unpredictable. But dairy steady, warm, nourishing, was a miracle that visited the table daily. A ladle of milk in porridge, a pat of butter on bread, a slice of cheese at supper. Small things, perhaps, but to an ordinary family, they were joys worth savoring. And so the day ends in the cottage with a soft glow of firelight and the faint scent of milk warming in a pot. Another memory. For the children, another quiet blessing. For the family, another thread in the fabric of their simple, beautiful world. The year's food wheel, seasons of plenty and lean. The year turned slowly in the little village, each season folding softly into the next like worn pages of a familiar book. For this family, and for countless others, 3 centuries ago, the rhythm of food is the rhythm of life itself. Everything they eat, everything they store, everything they hope for, depends on the changing of the seasons. Time is not measured by clocks or calendars, but by what grows, what ripens, what fades, and what must be preserved before the cold returns. Spring arrives shyly at first, appearing in tiny whispers rather than grand gestures. A faint green sheen spreads across the fields. The earth softens beneath cautious footsteps. Children run outside to look for the first signs of life poking through the young nettles. Tender leaves small shoots of new herbs. These early greens are more than just food. They are relief. After a winter of salted meat, dried vegetables, and hard bread, the taste of fresh plants feels almost magical. A pot of nettle soup brightens the table in a way only spring can. Even porridge feels livelier when stirred with new herbs. Families welcome spring with quiet gratitude, aware that these early offerings are life's gentle promise that the year is beginning again. As the weeks pass, spring grows bolder, buds swell on trees, birds return with their cheerful chatter, and gardens begin to fill with purpose. The family works the soil from sunup to sundown, planting seeds, watering tender sprouts, watching for frosts that might steal the young life they have nurtured. The days are longer now, but still cool, and the breeze carries the scent of clean earth and hope. Spring meals are simple and fresh, full of tender leaves and early roots. They taste like new beginnings. Then summer sweeps in, warm and generous, filling the world with abundance. The garden swells with live peas, climb their vines, beans dangle in green clusters, onions broaden their bulbs, and berries appear in sudden, wonderful waves. Children go out with baskets and return with hands stained deep red or purple from berry juice, laughing at their own sticky faces. Meals become a celebration of freshness. Bowls overflow with peas, plates filled with crisp greens, and early apples begin to show blushes of color. The days are long, and so is the work, but the bounty makes every ache worth it. Yet summer is not a season for laziness. It is a season of preparation. Even as the fields glow with warmth and growth, families know that winter is already whispering its distant warning. Every berry picked must be dried or cooked into jam. Every herb must be tied in bundles and hung from the rafters. Every bean must be shelled, every onion braided, every cabbage watched carefully. The sun may be high, but the shadow of winter stretches gently across every task. Still, summer evenings bring a softness all their own, long twilights filled with the smells of warm soil, fresh vegetables, and the laughter of neighbors calling across the lanes. When autumn arrives, it does so with a grandness that touches every corner of the village. The air turns crisp, the fields turn golden, and the sky fills with migrating birds moving in quiet, graceful patterns. Autumn is a season of gratitude, but also one of urgency. There is much to do, and only so much sunlight left in the day. Harvest becomes a flurry of motion, pulling carrots from their beds, lifting potatoes from deep in the cool earth, snipping the last herbs, and gathering apples until baskets overflow. The family works shoulder to shoulder, knowing that every stored root and dried fruit is a small shield against the coming cold. Autumn meals are warm and hearty. Stews become thicker. Bread feels more essential. The first apples of the season are sliced and dried or cooked into pies. Cider is pressed, filling the air with the sharp, sweet scent of apples crushed beneath heavy wooden beams. At night, the hearth glows brightly, and the conversations revolve around the harvest: what came early, what grew poorly, what must be stored carefully to last the winter. Then winter settles in. It does not arrive all at once. It begins softly, with shorter days, longer shadows, and mornings coated in frost. The fields grow pale and empty. The garden falls asleep under a blanket of cold, and the world becomes still. Winter is the season that tests a family's foresight. The foods preserved in summer and autumn now fill the table. Dried apples softened in porridge, salted meat that must be soaked before cooking, jars of pickled vegetables that brighten otherwise heavy meals, and hearty root stews that simmer all afternoon, warming the home from the inside out. The pace of life slows. The days feel quiet and contemplative. The hearth becomes a refuge against the icy winds that rattle the shutters. Food in winter is not just nutrition, it is comfort. A bowl of hot soup can feel like a blanket for the soul. Families gather close, sharing stories, mending worn clothes, and waiting patiently for the first signs of spring to appear again. Through all these seasons, children learn the quiet truth of the year-end food wheel. Nothing is guaranteed unless you prepare for it. They watch as each season offers something different. Freshness, summer's abundance, autumn's harvest, winter's endurance. They see how the earth provides, but also how it demands respect. The year becomes a silent teacher, reminding them that food is not simply bought or selected. It is earned through patience, labor, and trust in the land. And so, as another year turns and the family sits around their wooden table, they understand something deeper than hunger or satisfaction. They understand the rhythm of life itself, how it grows, slows, gathers, and rests. Their meals carry the memory of each season, each moment of planting, picking, storing, and cooking. Every bite tells the story of the year. When the first green shoots of spring push through the earth once more, the family will smile knowingly. They have walked the wheel again, step by step, and found their place in its quiet, dependable circle. Markets and street foods. Small festivals of flavor morning settles over the village like a soft quilt, warm and familiar. But today it carries a different kind of energy, a gentle excitement woven through the air. It's market day, a weekly rhythm that breathes life into the community. Even before the sun rises fully, families can feel the shift. Animals stir earlier, doors open sooner, and the narrow dirt paths leading toward the town square filled with footsteps, quiet chatter, and the occasional creak of a wooden cartwheel turning over uneven ground. The market is not far, a short walk down a lane lined with hedges and small houses, but the journey feels spirited. Children tug eagerly at their parents' sleeves, already imagining the treats they might find. Roasted chestnuts, a small cake, maybe a bit of warm bread from the baker's booth. Market day is not a grand event with entertainers and music. It is humble, gritty, and real. Yet in its simplicity, it becomes a little festival of everyday life. As the family approaches the square, the sound gradually builds a low hum of voices, the clatter of buckets, the calls of vendors setting up their stalls. 10. Sudan Li. They step into the heart of it. A bustling patchwork of tables, carts, sacks, barrels, baskets, and colorful cloth coverings flapping gently in the breeze. Market day gathers everyone, farmers with dirt still under their nails, fishermen from the nearby river, traveling peddlers carrying goods from distant towns, and villagers who have saved their coins or items to trade during the week. The smells greet them first. Fresh bread still steaming from the oven, smoked fish hanging from hooks, earthy vegetables pulled from the soil that very morning, baskets of apples, pears, and sometimes seasonal berries, shining like little jewels. The family we follow moves slowly, savoring the sights and sounds. The father pauses near a butcher's table where strips of dried meat hang in neat lines. The mother examines a small pile of onions, pressing them gently to check their firmness. The children drift toward the stalls where street foods are sold, modest treats, humble creations made from simple ingredients but full of comfort. A man with a wide grin and soot-covered hands stands beside a brazier of roasting chestnuts. The smell is irresistible, warm, slightly sweet, and smoky. Chestnuts pop gently in their shells as the heat swells them, and the vendor tosses them expertly with a long wooden paddle. Ik is out warm chestnuts. Fresh chestnuts, and the children gather close, mesmerized. Nearby, a woman sells small hand pies, little pockets of dough filled with whatever ingredients she has available that day. Some contain mashed peas and onions, others hold bits of barley mixed with herbs. On special market days, she might even offer fruit pies, the crust crisp and uneven, sprinkled with a pinch of coarse sugar. These pies are not elaborate desserts. They are practical, portable meals. Workers buy them to carry into the fields. Children love them because they can be eaten with one hand. In another corner of the market, a baker sets out flat cakes made from leftover dough. These cakes are cooked quickly on a griddle, creating a warm, slightly charred surface that carries the comforting taste of smoke. Sometimes the baker brushes them lightly with honey or sprinkles a bit of cinnamon if he has managed to afford some that week. Fishmongers display salted herrings and fresh catches from the river. The smell is strong, so strong that some children wrinkle their noses, but for many families, fish is the cheapest and most reliable source of protein. Dried fish hangs like banners from a crossbeam, each piece cured in salt and sunlight, ready to last weeks or months. Everywhere, there is motion. A basket of apples is set down, and within minutes, most of it is gone. A farmer walks through the crowd with a bag of grains slung over his shoulder, heading for a stall where he will exchange the grain for tools or cloth. A peddler, dusty from travel, offers ribbons, needles, soap, and rare spices like nutmeg or cloves. Children gather around him with awe. His goods come from far beyond the edges of their world. Even a tiny pinch of spice added to a holiday pudding is enough to make a family feel extravagant. The market is a place of news as much as food. People talk about weather, harvests, illnesses, distant rumors, and small triumphs. A neighbor might mention that his cow gave birth to a calf. Another person might speak of a coming storm. Gossip drifts like warm smoke between stalls. It's here that people learn who is ill, who is newly married, whose child has taken their first steps. Community ties tightened with each shared word. The children, cheeks flushed from excitement, linger near a stall where a woman sells thin fried cakes made from oats and a bit of fat. The cakes sizzle on a pan, releasing a scent that mixes perfectly with the autumn air. The vendor smiles and hands each child a small piece to taste. A moment later, the mother exchanges a few coins for several warm cakes wrapped in cloth. No one hurries through the market. It is the pause in the week, a moment to feel connected to others, a reminder that life is shared. The father chats briefly with a fisherman about the river's changing currents. The mother greets a friend she hasn't seen since the last market day and shares news about their gardens. Even the children feel a sense of belonging as they wander among stalls, recognizing faces, exchanging shy smiles. As the sun rises higher, music drifts faintly across the square, a fiddler practicing nearby, each note a bit wobbly but cheerful. Children dance clumsily in the dirt to the uneven rhythm. Vendors laugh. Someone claps along. For a few moments, work is forgotten. Worries soften, and the market becomes a tiny celebration of community. The family's basket fills slowly. Carrots, a small wheel of cheese, a jar of honey, a cloth bundle holding dried apples, and a few treasured treats the children will remember for days. They may not have spent much, but they have gathered plenty new flavors, new stories, new connections. As they prepare to walk home, the market continues behind them, vibrant and alive. Vendors continue calling out, children keep laughing, and neighbors linger in conversation. The smells, the sounds, the warm food in their hands, all of it becomes part of the memory of this day. When the family reaches home, they place their small treasures on the wooden table. The hearth will warm again soon, and tonight's meal will carry the taste of the market, the sweetness of dried fruit, the crispness of fresh vegetables, maybe even the smoky richness of roasted chestnuts. Market day ends as gently as it began, but its warmth lingers, a reminder that even in a simple world of hard work and limited resources, food can bring joy, connection, and a touch of celebration. A once-a-week festival of flavor, woven into the rhythm of ordinary life. What they drank. Comforts in a cup. The day begins with the soft glow of morning light filtering through the shutters, and the family stirs awake with the familiar sounds of a household easing into motion. But before the baking, gardening, or mending begins, before the hearth is fully awakened and the chores divide themselves among the family, there is always one small ritual that sets the tone for the day. A drink warming in a cup. 3 centuries ago, the range of beverages available to ordinary families was far simpler than the endless shelves we know today. There were no colorful bottles, no sparkling sodas, no flavored coffees lined up behind polished counters. Instead, the choices were shaped by necessity, safety, tradition, and the quiet wisdom of generations. What people drank each day reflected their environment, their work, and the calm rhythm of a life closely tied to nature. The simplest drink was water, but water was also the most uncertain. Streams could be clean or contaminated depending on the rainfall, the animals wandering nearby, or the habits of neighbors. Wells varied from house to house, some dependable, some not. So families learned long ago to be cautious. Water was boiled when possible or flavored with herbs to mask any questionable taste. Because of this, many preferred other drinks that felt safer, warmer, and more comforting. One of the most common beverages was small birra, mild, low-alcohol brew made from barley or other grains. Unlike the strong ales found in taverns, Small beer was gentle enough for children, refreshing enough for laborers, and reliable enough to drink daily. Brewing was a household task. Families set aside a portion of their grain, not for baking, but for fermenting. The process helped kill harmful microbes, turning risky water into a smooth, slightly sweet drink that sustained people throughout the day. Mothers often packed flasks of small beer for children to take to school. It was nourishment as much as hydration. In regions where apples grew abundantly, cider became a beloved companion. Tart or sweet, depending on the year's harvest. Cider was pressed in autumn and stored in wooden casks that lined cool cellars. Hard-working hands valued cider after long days in the fields. Its crisp flavor cut through the heaviness of bread and stews, and even during winter, a mug of cider slightly sharpened by months of age brought a whisper of autumn to the table. Neighbors sometimes gathered to press apples together, their laughter mingling with the rhythmic creak of wooden presses. Yet not every drink came from grains or orchards. Many families made simple herbal infusions, steeping whatever nature offered. Peppermint, chamomile, nettle, elderflower, with its own taste, fragrance, and folk wisdom. A cup of chamomile at night calmed a restless child. Mint soothed stomach aches, or warmed chilled fingers on a winter evening. These herbal drinks felt like comfort in its purest form, created not from wealth or trade, but from the land beneath one's feet. In some homes, a kettle would hang from the hearth hooks throughout the day, ready to warm herbs or water whenever needed. Steam drifted into the air, carrying hints of wildflowers or leaves collected by children during summer's golden hours. These drinks were quiet companions, simple and soothing, but sometimes life offered a rare treat, a whisper of the wider world beyond the village. Tea, coffee, and hot chocolate. These drinks were not common. In fact, they were luxuries novelties that traveled great distances through traders and merchants. Tea leaves from Asia, coffee beans from far-off lands, cocoa from the Americas. Even the poorest families heard stories about these drinks long before they tasted them. When tea arrived in a village, it was kept in small tins or jars, used sparingly, often only for guests or special occasions. A mother might boil water carefully, letting the leaves steep just long enough to tint the water with their delicate color. Sugar was expensive, so many drank tea plain, savoring its gentle bitterness. In those moments, sipping tea felt like participating in something rare and elegant. Coffee was stronger, darker, more mysterious. It smelled like roasted earth and energy. A family might share a small pot on a feast day, passing the cups around, marveling at the flavor. It wasn't a morning routine, yet it was an event. Hot chocolate, thick and luxurious, was rarer still. Drinking chocolate was almost unheard of among ordinary folk, reserved for wealthier households or very special occasions. But stories of it spread like sparks. Children whispered about its sweetness. Adults wondered what it might taste like. Spices, when they appeared, added another layer of wonder. A pinch of cinnamon stirred into warm milk before bed. A piece of clove dropped into a pot of cider during winter. Nutmeg grated so sparingly that only the faintest aroma reached the table. These spices were like treasure maps pointing to distant worlds, reminders that life extended far beyond the boundaries of the village. Throughout the day, drinks played quiet but important roles. A mug of warm milk in the morning helps children shake off sleep. A cup of small beer refreshed a weary parent returning from the fields. Herbal tea settled the nerves of someone who had worked too hard or worried too much. Cider brought a hint of celebration to an ordinary supper. Every drink carried a purpose. None were mindless indulgences. Evenings brought their own rituals. When the fire grew tall and the family gathered close, the mother often warmed a small pot of milk over the coals. The children watched as the edges began to bubble, releasing a gentle, soothing aroma. Sometimes she added a drop of honey, sometimes a pinch of ground herb, sometimes nothing at all. Warm milk was beloved not for its taste alone, but for its comfort. It wrapped the children's minds in softness, preparing them for dreams. The father might drink a cup of cider or small beer, relaxing after a day filled with labor. The mother might sip a small cup of mint or chamomile, cradling it in her hands as she listened to the fire crackle. At night, the drinks became something more than nourishment. They became little rituals of closeness, of unwinding, of gratitude, in a world without electric lights, television, or clocks glowing from every corner. The act of drinking something warm by the fire felt like a meditation, the sound of the kettle shifting over the coals, the gentle swirl of steam rising from a cup, the soft clink of pottery. These were part of the soundtrack of daily life. Drinks reflected the rhythm of the year as much as meals did. Spring brought fresh herbal brews. Summer offered cool well water flavored with mint or lemon balm. Autumn introduced newly pressed cider. Winter revolved around warmth, milk, broth, hot water infused with dried herbs gathered months before. Through every season, each drink held a quiet meaning. They warmed cold mornings, eased tired muscles, soothed restless nights, and brightened celebrations. They spoke of family, of simplicity, of connection. They reminded people that comfort could be found not in abundance, but in small, thoughtful rituals. And so, as night folds itself gently over the cottage and the fire settles into glowing embers, the family finishes their last warm drinks of the day. The children's eyelids grow heavy. The parents breathe deeply. Outside, the wind sighs against the shutters. Inside, the warmth of the cup lingers soft, peaceful, and timeless, preserving the harvest. Food for the hard months by late autumn. When the air begins to sharpen and the earth cools beneath the soles of bare feet, the family feels a familiar mix of urgency and determination. Winter is no longer a distant, whispered is a steady approach, creeping closer each day. The fields have surrendered most of their treasures. The garden has given nearly all it can, and now the family must turn their attention to one of the most important tasks of the year, preserving the harvest. In a world without refrigerators or freezers, food preservation is not a hobby or a choice. It is a quiet act of survival. Every carrot pulled from the soil, every apple plucked from the tree, every cabbage cut from its stalk carries a silent question: how long can you keep me? The answer depends on skill, patience, tradition, and the steady rhythm of hands that know what winter demands. The root vegetables come first. Carrots, turnips, parsnips, and potatoes are lifted from the earth, brushed free of dirt, and sorted carefully. Some will be eaten quickly, but the majority must be stored. The family digs a pit in the cool ground near the back of the cottage, lining it with straw. Into this makeshift cellar go the hardiest vegetables, arranged in layers like the pages of a thick, earthy book. Straw cushions them, keeping moisture and frost at bay. When the pit is finally covered, it becomes a quiet guardian, holding the winter's lifeline beneath its cold surface. Inside the cottage, a different sort of work begins. Cabbages hang from rafters like heavy green lanterns. Herbs, gathered in late summer and early autumn, have dried into brittle bundles of fragrance. They dangled from beams, filling the air with hints of mint, thyme, sage, and rosemary. Their scents mingle with the smoky breath of the hearth, creating a comforting tapestry that speaks of meals yet to come. On a long wooden table, apples lie in neat rows. The family sorts them gently. Those with bruises will be eaten soon, while the firm, unblemished ones are wrapped in scraps of cloth or set aside in baskets lined with straw, kept in a cool, dark corner. These apples will last for months, softening slowly but keeping their sweetness. Then there are the berries and fruits gathered during summer, the blackberries picked from hedges, the plums shaken from branches. These have already undergone their transformation. Some were dried in the sun, shriveling into wrinkled jewels packed tightly into cloth sacks. Others were simmered with precious sugar to create thick jams, sealed in jars that will sit on shelves like treasures waiting to be unveiled. Sugar is costly, so jam is a luxury, reserved for celebrations or difficult days when a hint of sweetness might lift a weary spirit. The process of preserving meat is more solemn, almost ceremonial. If the family has slaughtered a pig or traded for cuts of meat, the work begins early on cold mornings. Meat is packed in layers of coarse salt, which draws moisture from the flesh and keeps spoilage at bay. The salt crust hardens, turning pale and grainy. Sometimes the meat is hung near the hearth, where the smoke curls around it day after day, infusing it with flavor and helping it survive the long months ahead. The scent of smoking meat is heavy and comforting, drifting through the cottage like a reminder that the family has prepared well. Fish undergo a similar transformation. Any fish caught late in the season is cleaned, salted, and sometimes dried on racks, set near breezy windows or the smoke of the hearth. On Ciardened, these species can last weeks or even months. When winter storms make fishing impossible, these preserved fish become lifesavers, simmered in stews or eaten with bread when fresh food is scarce. Not all preservation is practical, some of it is almost magical. Fermentation, for example, takes foods that might spoil quickly and turns them into something entirely new. Large crocks, filled with cabbage, salt, and water sit quietly in corners of the cottage, gently bubbling over days as the cabbage transforms into tangy sour sustenance. These fermented foods, rich in flavor and longevity, offer brightness in the darkest cold. Pickles fill jars on the shelves, cucumbers, onions, even bits of carrot or beans. The tang of vinegar and spice adds a welcome spark to winter meals. These jars, glowing with pale greens and deep reds, are like little lanterns of promise. When snow traps the village inside 4 days, opening a jar of pickles is like opening a memory of warmer weather. Every member of the family has a role in these preparations. Children gather fallen apples, peel vegetables, rinse jars, or string beans to dry. The parents tend the fire, pack salt, stir pots, and check the progress of fermenting. Even the grandparents, though their steps might be slower, oversee the work with careful eyes, offering advice drawn from decades of winters. They remember years when the frost arrived too early or the harvest came too late, and their stories guide the hands of the younger generations. The cottage grows crowded during this season. Baskets of onions braid together and hang from hooks. Sacks of grain lean against walls. Shelves groan under the weight of jars, crocks, dried herbs, and bundles of roots. The small space becomes a living pantry, a quiet testament to the family's hard work and foresight. As the days shorten, the urgency fades into a steady calm. The pantry is full. The cellar holds its bounty. The rafters are lined with herbs and dried goods, and the family feels a deep sense of relief. Winter may be long, but they have prepared. When winter finally settles in, thick and unyielding, the family turns to their preserved foods with gratitude. A handful of dried apples brought to life in a pot of porridge, a piece of salted pork simmered in a stew, a scoop of fermented cabbage, adding temps to a heavy meal, beans rehydrated in warm water until they swell once more. These foods are not just nutrients, they are memories of warm months, captured and saved. On particularly cold nights, when frost crawls across the windows and the wind howls like a restless creature, the family gathers around the hearth with a simple meal warmed in a pot that has seen countless winters. They eat slowly, savoring not only the flavors but the comfort of knowing that each bite was prepared with care and carried through time. Preservation, in this world, is more than a chore. It is a quiet dialogue between seasons, a promise spoken from autumn to winter. We will endure this together. And so, when snow blankets the fields and silence fills the village, the family rests with the steady confidence that the earth, their hands, and their traditions have provided all they need to survive the cold months ahead. Feasts, gatherings, and communal kindness, winter loosens its grip slowly, like an old hand unclenching. As the days grow longer and the air softens, the village begins to stir in ways that feel almost ceremonial. Work resumes in the fields and gardens, of course, but something else awakens to something lighter, warmer, woven, not from necessity, but from joy. For families living 300 years ago, celebrations were rare gems scattered throughout the year. When day came, they arrived not with extravagance, but with togetherness. Food was always at the heart of it, simple, humble food elevated by the spirit of community. The first true gathering of the year often rises out of spring's relief. The thaw opens the roads again. Neighbors visit Morisali, and small clusters of villagers gather to share stories of winter, to check on elders, to exchange what little news reached them through the cold months. These are not grand events. They are gentle, familiar assemblies, marked by warm smiles and shared bowls of broth or bread dipped into a communal pot simmering over a large hearth. But as the year unfolds, occasions for larger feasts emerge. Weddings, christenings, harvest celebrations, St. Deus. First, each one a chance to gather, give thanks, and break bread together. Some families might host modest gatherings in their cottages. But the truly festive occasions spill into open fields, barns, or the village green. These gatherings are built not on wealth or luxury, but on contributions from every household. When a feast approaches, the village prepares, like a single, large family. One home sends bread, another provides a wheel of cheese. Someone else brings cider pressed in autumn, still bubbling faintly in its barrels. The family we've followed through this story contributes what they can, perhaps a basket of carrots, a fresh loaf, or a small crock of butter churned just the day before. No offering is too small. Every item becomes part of the table, a patchwork of generosity. On the morning of a feast, the village feels transformed. Children run ahead in excitement, shouting greetings and chasing each other across the grass. Women lay out clothes and plates, smoothing wrinkles carefully. Men carry benches and barrels, arranging seating beneath the open sky. Someone always arrives with musica fiddle, or a small drum, begins warming up, filling the air with crooked notes that make children laugh. Food arrives slowly, in waves, bowls of boiled potatoes, baskets overflowing with bread coarse, dark heavy loaves, platters of stewed beans or lentils. On the rarest and most celebrated occasions, a roasted chicken or even a goose. The scent alone draws people closer. A large pot of stew might be placed on a raised stone, its surface shimmering with fat and vegetables. Herbs float on top, releasing bursts of fragrance each time the pot is stirred. Tables are long and mismatched. Plates are chipped. Spoons come from different households. None of this matters. The beauty of the feast lies not in the setting, but in the shared abundance. People sit wherever they find space, children crammed together at the end. Elders given the softest spots near the center, parents settling around them like a protective circle. When the first ladle is dipped into the stew, the feast truly begins. Conversations rise like warm smoke into the air. Laughter ripples through the crowd. Friends exchange stories, catching up on seasons missed in the busy rhythm of daily labor. New friendships spark, old ones deepen. The meal becomes a tapestry of flavors and voices, each spoonful grounding everyone in a shared moment of peace and belonging. And then come the quiet acts of kindness that leave the deepest impressions. A mother cuts her piece of meat in half to give to a child from a poorer home. An elderly neighbor is offered a second helping before others refill their bowls. A shy child is given a sweet cake, made especially for the occasion, his eyes widening with delight. Someone notices a tired farmer sitting alone and moves to sit beside him. In these small gestures, the feast becomes more than a meal. It's an expression of community care. Sometimes joy spills beyond the table. Music begins. A fiddler strikes up a tune that lifts spirits and draws people to their feet. Children dance first, hopping unevenly, giggling as they stumble. Young adults follow their steps, uncertain but eager. Even elders sway gently, clapping along. The music simple, rustic, heartfelt threads through the laughter, binding everyone in a moment that feels timeless. Feasts are not limited to happy occasions, though in times of loss or hardship, the village still gathers. When a family grieves, neighbors arrive with bread, soup, cheese, and quiet company. When a home burns or sickness strikes, meals appear at the doorstep, warm, nourishing, sent with love rather than ceremony. These gatherings are softer, quieter, but no less powerful. Food becomes comfort, compassion made tangible. The harvest feast, held once the fields have been gathered and the barns filled, is the grandest event of all. By then, the air carries the crisp promise of autumn. The tables overflow with the earth's gifts: apples, root vegetables, fresh bread, butter, preserved berries, pies sweetened with whatever honey or sugar could be spared. Children receive extra treats, and adults take their time, savoring the satisfaction of a year's work completed. As the sun sets during the harvest feast, lanterns are lit, fires crackle, and voices mellow into song. These songs, simple, steady, often sung slightly off-key, float into the night like soft prayers of gratitude. Of course, Not every gathering is perfect. Someone always spills cider, sending children into fits of laughter. A pie might burn slightly on the bottom. A dog might steal a piece of bread and run off triumphantly. A sudden gust of wind might send tablecloths fluttering and cups tumbling. But these imperfections only add to the warmth of the day. They become stories retold years later, memories that make future gatherings richer. By the time each feast winds down and the last crumbs disappear, a gentle tiredness settles on the village. People linger, reluctant to leave the warmth of shared company. Eventually, families gather their baskets, wrap leftover scraps in cloth, and begin the slow walk home through quiet lanes. Children fall asleep on their parents' shoulders. Elders walk arm in arm. The moon rises, casting silver light across the fields, and the joy of the day follows everyone home like a comforting shadow. Inside the cottage, the family places their leftovers carefully on the table. The fire is rekindled. The soft smell of stew and bread still clings to their clothes. They sit together for a moment, letting the day settle into their bones. There is a warmth inside them that has little to do with food and everything to do with the love and connection they felt among their neighbors. Tesa feasts, these gatherings, these quiet kindnesses, they are the threads that hold the village together. They remind everyone that even in a world of toil and uncertainty, joy can be found in shared bowls, shared stories, and shared hearts. Borrowing, bartering, and the table as a symbol, the village wakes to another quiet morning. The soft light slipping across rooftops and drifting gently into windows. Inside the cottage, the family begins their day the way they always do, by tending to the fire, stirring the embers back into a gentle flame, and preparing a simple meal that will carry them through the morning's work. Yet beneath this familiar rhythm lies something deeper, something woven into the very fabric of their lives. The quiet, steady exchange of kindness, trust, a necessity that keeps the community alive. In a world where money is limited and supplies are often unpredictable, bartering becomes the invisible thread connecting neighbors. This is not bartering as a dramatic negotiation or a formal trade. It is softer, humbler, shaped by relationships rather than value charts. A family might trade a basket of herbs for a wedge of cheese. A repaired tool might earn a bundle of firewood. A jug of fresh milk might be exchanged for a piece of cloth. No one keeps strict accounts. The balance is maintained not by numbers, but by goodwill. In the early hours of the morning, a gentle knock sounds at the family's door. A neighbor stands outside, holding a small crock of honey. Herbie's did well this year, and she has enough to share a little with those who helped her during the long season. The mother answers the door with a warm smile, and before a word is spoken, she knows the neighbor isn't here for money. Instead, she offers a bundle of dried herbs gathered in late summer. The exchange is simple, unplanned, and deeply meaningful. It strengthens the quiet confidence that no one in the village will be left wanting if others can help. The father, meanwhile, is mending a wooden wheel that cracked under the weight of a heavy load. Woodworking is not his trade, but his hands are steady, and the village carpenter once showed him how to reinforce a weak joint. When the wheel is fixed, he walks it across the lane to a man who helped him salt pork last winter. No payment is needed. The two men share a nod and a few words about the coming weather. Their exchange is not counted as debt, it is simply the rhythm of community. Later in the day, the children run through the garden, gathering eggs from the small flock of hens behind the house. Their faces shine with delight each time they find a warm egg nestled in the straw. Eggs are precious, and the family keeps most of them. But today, the mother places 3 in a small basket. She sends the children across the path to deliver them to an elderly widow who cannot keep her own hens anymore. The children return with a handful of dried apples, sweet, chewy, and full of autumn's memory. They grin wide, proud of their part in helping someone else. Sometimes the exchanges are direct. Other times they are quiet acts of generosity with no expectation at all. When a baby is born in the village, meals appear at the new parent's doorstep: stews, bread, a piece of cheese wrapped carefully in cloth, a bit of honey for the mother's tea. When someone falls ill, neighbors gather to repair fences, tend animals, or help harvest a field. No one asks whose responsibility it is. The community simply moves, shifting its strength toward the places where it is needed most. This shared responsibility is reflected most clearly at the family table. In this little cottage, The table is more than wood and nails. It is the gathering point, the surface where every joy, struggle, and exchange finds its place. Meals are prepared here. Prayers whispered here. Gossip shared and decisions made. The table listens without judgment, remembers without speaking. Tonight, as the family prepares supper, the table carries the fruits of their days, exchanges a few roots from the pit outside, a small piece of cheese traded for helping a neighbor mend a fence, a spoonful of honey offered as thanks. Each item tells a quiet story of connection. The meal they prepare may be simple, but it is layered with gratitude, generosity, and community effort. Every bite is shared with the invisible presence of those who contributed. The pot on the hearth simmers slowly. Inside, vegetables soften into broth, absorbing the flavors of herbs traded earlier in the morning. The smell fills the room, drifting into the rafters, where dried bundles of sage and thyme hang like small blessings. The family sits at the table, their laughter gentle, their voices low. The dog settles nearby, tail thumping softly in expectation. As they eat, warmth expands through the room, warmth from the stew, warmth from the fire, warmth from the knowledge that they are not alone in the world. The children recount their day with excited voices, describing their visit to the widow's home, the sweet dried apples they received, the stories she told them as she sat by her window. Their parents listen with fond smiles, proud of the kindness their children are learning. After supper, as the bowls are cleared and washed, the father places a freshly cut slice of bread onto a wooden board. He wraps it in cloth and sets it by the door. Tomorrow morning, he will take it to a neighbor whose harvest was thin this year. The family doesn't have much, but they have enough to share. In this world, enough is a powerful word. When night settles in fully, darkness gathers softly around the cottage. The fire sinks low, casting gentle shadows across the table. The mother places her hand on the wood as she passes him. For a moment, she reflects on the hundreds of meals. The table has held meals eaten in joy, meals eaten in sadness, meals eaten in community and in solitude. The table has witnessed life unfolding, season after season. And like the table, the family is part of something larger, a web of people bound, not by wealth, but by care. Their lives are not easy, but they are rich with connection. The village is a living, breathing thing, strengthened by each exchange, each shared loaf, each helping hand. Food here is not merely sustenance. It is a language, a promise, a gesture of belonging. As the last embers pulse in the hearth, the family climbs to their beds, warm and content. Outside, the night settles over fields and paths and homes where similar scenes are unfolding. Neighbors finishing meals, children drifting to sleep, someone leaving a loaf of bread on a doorstep under the starlight. In the quiet of the night, one truth holds steady in this village. No table stands alone. Every table is connected to every other, forming a tapestry of trust, kindness, and shared humanity that keeps everyone fed, warmed, and hopeful. Thank you, dear listener, for wandering softly through history with me tonight. I hope this quiet journey into the kitchens and hearths of 3 centuries past brought you a little comfort, a little warmth, and a gentler breath than the one you arrived with. To all of you who return night after night, truly, thank you. Your presence, your kindness, your peaceful company, they mean more than you know. And to our new viewers drifting in for the first time, welcome. If you enjoyed this gentle walk through the past, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined our sleepy circle here at Go to Sleep Historian. As this tale settles into silence, the screen will shift into soft, calming music. So if your eyes are growing heavy, if your thoughts are slowing into stillness, you can drift into rest without needing to move a muscle. Wherever you are tonight, and wherever you're listening from, I'm grateful you spent this time with us. Until our next quiet journey together. Good night, and sleep well.